Get those fucking trucks off my property before I call every law enforcement agency in 3 counties and report you for domestic terrorism. I was standing in front of my Oregon vineyard at 7 in the morning, shotgun slung over my shoulder, work boots planted in gravel that belonged to me and me alone, staring down 3 industrial chemical tankers that had just rolled onto my land without permission, without warning, without a single shred of legal authority. The lead driver, middle-aged guy with a gut and a nervous twitch, wearing a Harmony Hills Community Services vest that looked freshly printed, held up a clipboard like it was a shield against my fury. "Ma'am, we're here on authorized HOA business." Authorized by who? I took a step forward, shotgun shifting position just enough to remind everyone present that this was my land, my rules, my threshold for bullshit. This is private agricultural property. You're trespassing. Those tanks say agricultural fumigant, but I'm guessing whatever chemical cocktail you're hauling isn't FDA approved for anything except intimidation and probably a few federal violations. The driver looked back at his truck, then at me, clearly realizing he'd been hired for something he didn't fully understand. Behind the 3 tankers, a white Range Rover pulled up, slow and deliberate, like the arrival of a villain in a movie nobody asked to see. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who radiated the kind of energy that made you want to check your pockets to make sure she hadn't stolen your wallet just by existing near you. Cream-colored Lululemon leggings that had never seen an actual workout, designer blazer that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, sunglasses so expensive they probably came with a stock portfolio, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, blonde highlights so perfect they screamed, "I have opinions about your landscaping." She walked toward me like she owned the gravel under her $1,000 shoes, like my vineyard was just another property waiting for her approval, like the world bent to her clipboard, and she expected me to do the same. "Miss Rodriguez?" she said, voice dripping with that practiced sympathy people use right before they screw you over. "I'm Christine Harwell, president of Harmony Hills Estates, HOA. We're here to make one final offer before things get complicated." Complicated? I pumped the shotgun once, not pointing it at anyone, just making the kind of point that echoes across 100 acres of land that has seen 47 years of my family's sweat and blood. The metallic sound cut through the morning air like a period at the end of a sentence. "You brought 3 industrial tankers full of God knows what toxic shit onto my vineyard at dawn with your fake security vests and your corporate speak threats. That's not complicated. That's felony trespassing, conspiracy, and possibly attempted chemical assault. That's a decade in federal prison if I'm feeling generous." Christine's smile didn't waver. It was the kind of smile sharks have right before they bite. "We're simply demonstrating what happens when someone refuses to cooperate with community standards, Elena. Your property is an eyesore. It's visible from our development. It lowers property values. We're prepared to make this go away quietly. We'll buy you out at fair market value, help you relocate somewhere more appropriate." Or, she gestured to the tanks with a perfectly manicured hand, "We can discuss what happens when cooperation breaks down completely. Are you threatening to poison my land?" "Of course not. That would be illegal." Her smile sharpened like a knife being drawn. "But accidents happen, don't they? Chemical spills, contamination incidents, things that make land unusable for agriculture. And if this property became legally unviable for wine production, well, the county has statutes about agricultural abandonment. The HOA could petition to assume stewardship, for the good of the community, of course." I was so furious I forgot how to blink. My hands tightened on the shotgun. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to do something violent, something permanent, something that would wipe that smug smile off her face forever. Then I heard footsteps behind me, heavy boots on wood. The screen door of my farmhouse creaking open. 2 men emerged into the morning light, coffee mugs in hand, expressions shifting from casual to deadly serious in the span of a heartbeat. Carlos Mendez, Former DEA special agent who'd spent 15 years busting cartel operations along the border, who'd kicked down doors in Sinaloa and lived to tell about it, who still had the scars and the instincts and the federal badge he could flash when necessary. Jake Morrison. Retired federal prosecutor who'd spent 20 years putting corrupt politicians and corporate criminals in prison, who knew every loophole in every statute and exactly how to weaponize the law against people who thought they were above it. They'd shown up last night for what was supposed to be a quiet weekend reunion, old Marine buddies, wine tasting, barbecue, war stories. Instead, they were about to witness an HOA president attempting agricultural terrorism in real time. "Ma'am," Carlos said, walking forward with his phone out and recording, thumb steady on the screen, eyes locked on Christine like a predator sizing up prey. "I'm Special Agent Carlos Mendez, DEA. I've been recording this entire conversation. You just made an explicit terroristic threat involving chemical agents on private property in front of federal witnesses. That sound you hear? That's your life ending." Christine's face went pale. The confident smile cracked like cheap porcelain. That's not what I meant." Jake stepped forward, calm and measured, every inch the prosecutor who'd made career criminals weep on the witness stand. "I'm Jake Morrison, former federal prosecutor. What you just described constitutes conspiracy to commit agricultural terrorism, attempted extortion under Oregon Revised Statutes 164.075, and possibly a few other federal charges we'll discover during discovery. You need to leave this property immediately. Before this gets worse." The tanker drivers were looking at each other now, sudden understanding dawning on their faces. The younger one, maybe 30, wearing work gloves and a vest that was 2 sizes too big, stepped down from his cab, hands raised. "Lady, nobody told us this was illegal," he said, voice shaking. "We were hired for a community demonstration. Some kind of protest or awareness thing. I didn't sign up for terrorism. I got kids, man." "I'm out." Another driver started backing his truck away, engine revving, gravel crunching. The third was reaching for his radio, probably calling whoever had hired him to ask what the hell was going on. Christine was screaming at them to stop, to stay, that this was all authorized, that they had contracts, that the HOA had rights. And that's when everything went to hell. One of the tanks, poorly sealed, badly maintained, filled with chemicals that shouldn't have been transported without hazmat certification, hissed open. The valve had failed, or been knocked loose, or simply given up under pressure. Liquid started spraying across the dry grass near my south vineyard. It wasn't fumigant. It didn't smell like anything agricultural. It smelled like diesel mixed with something harsh and chemical, something that made your eyes water and your throat close, something flammable. "Shut it off," someone yelled. "The valve's stuck. Too late." A spark, maybe static electricity from the truck's metal frame, maybe the morning sun hitting broken glass near the fence line, maybe just God deciding this was the perfect moment for cosmic justice, caught the fumes. I saw it happen in slow motion. The flicker, the ignition, the sudden bloom of orange and yellow spreading faster than thought. Whomp. The ground exploded. Flames erupted across 20 feet of grass, racing toward my vines faster than anyone could react. Black smoke rolled upward in a column visible for miles. Someone was screaming. Trucks were reversing. Christine stood frozen, mouth open, folder still clutched in her hand like she couldn't process what was happening. Carlos ran for my fire extinguisher. Jake was already on his phone calling 911, shouting our location and chemical fire and multiple casualties possible. I sprinted toward the barn to move equipment before the flames reached it, to free my dog who was barking frantically inside, to save what I could before everything my grandfather built turned to ash. The fire spread fast, dry, Oregon summer, perfect conditions, grass that hadn't seen rain in 3 weeks. It hit the wooden fence line and consumed 40 feet of posts in seconds. My irrigation shed caught old wood and stored materials going up like kindling. Flames licked at the edge of my oldest vines, the ones my grandfather planted in 1980 with his own hands. I heard sirens in the distance, fire trucks coming, but already I knew it was too late for some things. Already I could smell the loss, taste the ash, feel the heat of everything I loved burning. And through the smoke, I could see Christine Harwell standing perfectly still, designer shoes planted in gravel, watching my vineyard burn like she couldn't quite believe her plan had worked this well. Or this badly. 6 months ago, if you'd told me I'd be fighting an HOA president in criminal court over attempted arson and agricultural terrorism, I would have laughed in your face and poured you another glass of Pinot Noir. Back then, my biggest problem was whether to plant more Chardonnay or diversify into Syrah. Back then, I thought community standards was something reasonable people discussed over dinner, not a weapon used to destroy lives. I'm Elena Rodriguez, 42 years old, former Marine Corps logistics officer who spent 8 years coordinating supply chains in war zones where a missed shipment meant people died. Current owner of Rodriguez Family Vineyards, 118 acres of prime Willamette Valley wine country, 30 miles outside Portland, Oregon. My family has owned this land since 1978. That's when my grandfather, Manuel Rodriguez, bought it with money saved from 2 decades working timber mills up in Washington. He was 19 when he immigrated from Mexico, 35 when he finally had enough cash to buy his own piece of America, and 68 when he died peacefully on this porch overlooking vines he'd planted with his own hands. He built this vineyard from nothing, cleared the land himself, planted the first vines in rows so straight they looked machine cut, constructed the original wine barn with lumber he'd milled from trees he'd felled himself, survived droughts, floods, market crashes, and 3 different attempts by developers to buy him out. When he died 10 years ago, he left it to me with one instruction written in his will, in blocky handwriting I can still see when I close my eyes. Mija, keep it independent. No corporations. No developers. And for the love of God, no HOA bullshit. They'll smile while they stab you. Don't let them. That last part seemed like paranoid old man rambling at the time. I thought he was being dramatic, stuck in the past, unable to accept that modern communities could coexist peacefully with traditional agriculture. Now I understand he'd seen this coming decades before it arrived. He'd fought this fight already back in the 90 seconds when the first subdivision started creeping toward wine country. He'd stood his ground then. And now it was my turn. The property sits at the western edge of what used to be pristine farmland, rolling hills covered in oak groves, soil so rich and complex it practically grows award-winning wine on its own. When I took over the vineyard after my discharge from the Marines, the nearest neighbors were other small vineyards and a few horse ranches, people who understood land, people who respected boundaries, people who knew that farming meant early mornings, loud equipment, and animals that didn't care about your aesthetic preferences. We had an unspoken code out here. Mind your own business, help your neighbors when storms hit, and for God's sake, don't complain about roosters crowing at dawn because that's what roosters do. Then, Harmony Hills Estates broke ground 3 years ago. The development started as just another luxury subdivision, nothing unusual for Oregon's wine country, which had been gentrifying steadily as Portland's tech money discovered that owning a vineyard-adjacent property was the new status symbol. But Harmony Hills was different. This wasn't just expensive houses. This was a full-scale manufactured community with its own private security, its own lifestyle concierge services, and an HOA so aggressive it had a dedicated legal team on retainer. Cookie-cutter McMansions arranged in perfect rows, each one starting at $2.3 million. Streets named after wines they'd probably never tasted: Merlot Lane, Cabernet Circle, Chardonnay Court. Lawns so uniform and perfect they looked computer-generated, like someone had copy-pasted the same half-acre of grass 40 times and called it diversity. The kind of place where people paid millions of dollars to live in identical boxes and called it exclusive, where homeowners weren't allowed to plant vegetables without HOA approval, where Christmas lights had to be white, not colored, where community standards meant conformity enforced by fine print and passive-aggressive notices. At first, we coexisted. Different worlds that happened to share a property line. They had their matching mailboxes and their wine and cheese socials where nobody actually worked in wine. I had my vines, my tractor, my rescue dog Cisco, who thought HOA stood for humans, obviously annoying. I waved at them when they drove past. Some waved back. Some looked at my vineyard with thinly disguised distaste, like I was operating a junkyard instead of producing award-winning Pinot Noir. But mostly, we left each other alone. They stayed in their perfect suburb. I stayed on my land. The fence line marked more than property. It marked the boundary between their artificial world and my real one. Then the complaints started. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in March 2024. I was out checking irrigation lines in the East Vineyard, Cisco running ahead of me through the rows, when I noticed someone standing at my property line taking photos. Not casual photos, professional photography. Long lens camera on a tripod. Focused on my barn. I walked over, boots crunching on gravel. "Can I help you?" The man, mid-30s, polo shirt tucked into perfectly pressed khakis, hair gelled into submission, lowered the camera and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just documenting some concerns for the Harmony Hills Community Standards Committee." "Concerns about what?" "Your structures." He gestured vaguely toward my barn, my equipment shed, my tractor parked near the fence. "They're visible from our development. They don't meet aesthetic compliance standards outlined in our community guidelines." I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if he was serious or if this was some elaborate prank. "This is private property. That barn has been standing since 1980. You don't get to document concerns about land you don't own." Actually, he pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents like he was about to deliver a PowerPoint presentation. "Properties within visual range of Harmony Hills Estates are subject to community impact assessments. We're just ensuring quality of life for our residents. Your agricultural operations impact the viewshed." Viewshed. I repeated the word slowly, tasting how ridiculous it sounded. "You mean you don't like looking at an actual working vineyard while you sip overpriced lattes in your McMansion?" His smile tightened. "I'll include your attitude in my report. Include this too. Get off my land before I call the sheriff and report you for trespassing." He left. But not before taking a few more photos, making a show of documenting my hostility on his tablet. 2 days later, I found a glossy packet zip-tied to my gate. Harmony Hills Community Enhancement Initiative printed across the front in elegant font that probably cost someone's annual salary to design. Inside was a courtesy notice listing violations I'd apparently committed against an HOA I'd never joined. Unpermitted structures, barn, equipment shed, wine production facility, non-compliant fencing, barbed wire, weathered posts, excessive vegetation, unmanicured oak trees, wild grass along fence line, unsightly agricultural equipment, visible tractor, cultivation tools, noise violations, early morning equipment, operation. The final page offered a voluntary integration program. Pay $15,000 in annual HOA dues. Submit all property changes for board approval. Repaint my barn to match their approved color palette options, beige, slightly darker beige, or taupe, and agree to visual mitigation measures for my vineyard operations. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Then I threw the packet in the recycling and went back to work. That was my first mistake. I should have recognized it for what it was, not a courtesy notice, but a declaration of war wrapped in pastel paper and corporate buzzwords, because Christine Harwell didn't make courtesy requests. She made demands, and when demands didn't work, she escalated. 2 weeks later, Christine showed up at my door herself. I was in the barn organizing supplies when I heard the crunch of expensive tires on my driveway. I walked out to find a white Range Rover parked like it owned the place. Engine still running, driver's door open. Christine stepped out wearing designer sunglasses, cream-colored blazer over Lululemon leggings, holding a clipboard like it was a religious text. She knocked on my farmhouse door with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. "Elena Rodriguez?" she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand I didn't shake. "I'm Christine Harwell, president of Harmony Hills Estates HOA. I hope you received our community enhancement packet?" "I did. I recycled it." Her smile froze for just a second before snapping back into place. "I see. Well, I'm here to explain that these aren't suggestions, Elena. They're requirements. Harmony Hills has successfully petitioned the county to expand our community standards jurisdiction to include adjacent agricultural properties that impact our viewshed and property values. Viewshed. I said the word like I was trying to understand a foreign language. That's not a legal term, and you don't have jurisdiction over my land. Check the county records. This property is zoned exclusive agricultural, no HOA, no covenants, no restrictions. My grandfather made damn sure of that in 1978. Oregon law allows for community impact assessments when Oregon law allows you to manage your own development, not mine. This conversation is over. Christine's expression shifted, still smiling, but colder now, like frost forming on glass. "Elena, I'm trying to help you avoid unpleasantness. We have over 200 residents in Harmony Hills, very concerned residents, very influential residents, people who care deeply about property values. When those concerns aren't addressed, things can become difficult." Is that a threat? It's a warning. From one professional woman to another. She handed me her business card. Thick stock, embossed lettering, probably cost $3 per card. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. Before this gets out of hand. She left slowly, deliberately, glancing back once like she expected me to come running after her, begging to join their HOA and surrender my independence. I watched her Range Rover disappear down my driveway, dust rising like smoke signals. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of my own Pinot Noir and Cisco at my feet, listening to the evening sounds of my vineyard, wind through the vines, coyotes in the distance, the settling of old wood and earth. This land had been fought for, protected, defended, and I'd be damned if I let some HOA tyrant with a clipboard take it from me. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name was Sarah Chen, late 30s, sharp as a knife, with a reputation for destroying frivolous lawsuits before they made it past the filing stage. She'd been practicing property law in Oregon for 12 years and had personally prevented at least 20 land grabs by developers and HOAs. "Elena, this is textbook harassment," Sarah said after I explained the situation. "HOAs don't have authority over non-member properties. Period. Full stop. If they keep pushing, we'll file for restraining orders and sue for harassment under Oregon tort law." "How far do you think they'll go?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Hard to say. Some HOAs are reasonable. They stick to managing their own communities, resolving disputes, maintaining common areas. Others are run by people who think community standards means I get to control everyone and everything around me. This Christine Harwell sounds like the latter, a narcissist with a clipboard. Those types don't back down easily. So what do? Document everything. Every interaction, every visit, every threat, every complaint. Keep a log with dates, times, photos. Record conversations if Oregon's a one-party consent state, which it is. And call me immediately if they escalate beyond verbal harassment. You think they will? They already have. Sending you that packet, showing up at your property, that's escalation. The question isn't if they'll go further, it's how far. She wasn't wrong. The harassment started small, almost petty, like someone testing how much they could get away with before facing consequences. Anonymous complaints to the county about unpermitted construction. My barn that had been legally standing for 45 years. Code enforcement had to send inspectors who apologized profusely and confirmed everything was properly permitted. Noise complaints filed with the sheriff's department. Deputies showing up at 6 a.m. because someone reported disruptive agricultural machinery, my tractor, running at dawn, on a farm where tractors are supposed to run. Ma'am, we have to respond to every complaint, the deputy said apologetically, clearly annoyed at being dragged out here for nothing. But between you and me, this is harassment. Whoever's filing these knows exactly what they're doing. Document everything. I did. Photos, timestamps, recordings. Every ridiculous complaint. Every trespass. Every invasion. My harassment log grew thicker every week. Then they got creative. I started finding black trash bags dumped near my gate. Not random litter, targeted dumping. The bags were filled with yard waste, broken bottles, construction debris, left specifically where my vineyard entrance met the public road, designed to make my property look like a trash heap. I set up a trail camera. Within 3 days, I caught them on video. A white Mercedes SUV with a Harmony Hills parking sticker, pulling up at 2 a.m., driver tossing bags and speeding away. I called the sheriff. They added it to the file. No arrests, just more documentation. Someone cut my irrigation lines. Not weather damage or equipment failure, clean cuts with a blade, deliberate sabotage. 3 main lines severed in the middle of the night. My vines went days without water during a heat wave before I discovered the damage. Repair cost, $8,400. I added security cameras. More motion sensors. More trail cams. My vineyard was starting to look like a military installation, but I didn't care. I needed evidence. My mailbox was knocked over. Not once, but 3 times in 2 weeks. The 3rd time, someone used a vehicle I found tire tracks, a bent post broken at the base, tire rubber smeared on the metal. Deliberate destruction. I replaced it with a steel mailbox set in concrete, mounted cameras watching it 24/7, dared them to try again. Then came the drone. I first noticed it on a Wednesday morning, a white quadcopter buzzing over my vineyard at dawn, flying low over the vines, circling my house, hovering near my bedroom windows like a mechanical stalker. I grabbed a pellet gun my grandfather had used for pest control and took aim. First shot missed. Second, clipped a rotor. Third and fourth brought it down, spinning and crashing into the south vineyard with a satisfying crunch. I retrieved the wreckage and found the proof I'd been waiting for, a registration sticker on the bottom. Harmony Hills Community Surveillance Program, with a serial number and contact information. Christine showed up that same afternoon, marching up my driveway in heels like she was walking a runway, phone out and recording before she even reached my porch. "You destroyed HOA property," she said, voice pitched for her camera. "That's vandalism, criminal destruction. We have witnesses." "I defended my property from unlawful surveillance," I replied, also recording on my phone. "That drone was trespassing in my airspace, violating FAA regulations, Oregon privacy laws, and probably a few federal statutes I haven't looked up yet. You want it back? It's in pieces in my barn. You can retrieve them with a warrant. We'll see what the authorities say about this. Please do. I'll give them the footage of your drone violating my privacy, buzzing my livestock, and hovering outside my bedroom window at 6 a.m. I'm sure the FAA will be very interested." She left without another word. But her face, jaw tight, eyes cold, that smile finally gone, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to stop. They were escalating, testing boundaries, trying to push me until I broke. But I'm not the breaking type. 8 years in the Marines taught me that. You don't break under pressure. You dig in. You adapt. You fight. And I was ready to fight. I called Carlos and Jake that night, old Marine buddies from my logistics officer days. Carlos had gone DEA after discharge, spent 15 years busting cartel operations along the Mexican border. Jake had become a prosecutor, worked his way up to the federal level, spent 2 decades putting corrupt politicians and corporate criminals in prison. I need backup, I told them. Not the shooting kind, the legal kind. These HOA people are escalating, and I think it's about to get worse. How much worse? Jake asked. I don't know, but they've already committed trespassing, vandalism, harassment, unlawful surveillance. They're not going to stop at property crimes. When do you need us? This weekend? Carlos laughed. We'll bring the good tequila. Sounds like you're going to need it. They arrived Friday evening, Carlos in a battered pickup truck with DEA credentials still in his glove box, Jake in a sensible sedan with a briefcase full of legal pads and case law. We spent the night on my porch drinking wine and catching up, telling war stories, remembering when our biggest problems were IEDs and supply chain breakdowns. Show me everything, Jake said eventually. I pulled out my harassment log, 2 binders full of documentation, photos, videos, recordings, printed emails, complaint filings, repair receipts, a comprehensive record of 6 months of systematic harassment. Carlos whistled low. This isn't just an HOA dispute. This is conspiracy. Organized harassment. Possibly RICO if we can prove ongoing criminal enterprise. Can we? With this documentation? Maybe, but we'd need evidence of coordination. Proof that multiple people were working together under Christine's direction. I've got surveillance footage of 5 different vehicles from Harmony Hills dumping trash at my gate. Different drivers, same parking stickers, all within 2 weeks. Jake looked up from the binder. That's coordination. That's conspiracy. Elena, you've built a prosecutable case here. Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need it. Saturday morning, the tankers arrived. I heard them before I saw them. Deep rumbling, wrong engines, the sound of vehicles that didn't belong on a vineyard. I walked outside, coffee mug in hand, and watched 3 massive industrial chemical tankers roll up my driveway like they were delivering a payload in a war zone. Behind them, Christine's Range Rover. Behind that, 2 pickup trucks with Harmony Hill security stenciled on the sides. I set down my coffee and grabbed my shotgun from inside, not to shoot anyone, just to establish that I was serious, that this was my land, that they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The tankers stopped about 50 feet from my barn. Engines idling, diesel fumes mixing with morning fog. The lead driver looked confused, like he'd been hired for a job he didn't fully understand. Christine got out of her Range Rover in full costume, Lululemon leggings and cream, designer blazer, sunglasses that probably cost more than my tractor, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She walked toward me slowly, deliberately, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. But I wasn't the one who should be scared. Elena, she said warmly, voice pitched for the cameras I could see her security people holding. We're here to resolve this situation once and for all. With chemical tankers? Symbolic demonstration. She pulled out a folder, flipped it open like she was about to deliver a sales pitch. These are the final revised terms for your voluntary HOA integration. We've included property upgrades, tax benefit analyses, and a temporary waiver for your non-compliant structures. All you have to do is sign. You brought 3 industrial tankers full of agricultural fumigant onto my property to deliver paperwork? Her smile didn't waver. This is about consequences, Elena. You refuse to cooperate. You sue our residents. You make us look unreasonable in the media. You shoot down our equipment. So, we're here to demonstrate what happens when community harmony breaks down completely. You're threatening to poison my vineyard. Of course not. That would be illegal. Her smile sharpened. But accidents happen. Chemical spills. Contamination incidents. Things that make land legally unviable for wine production. And if this property became unusable for agriculture, well, Oregon has statutes about abandoned agricultural land. The county can declare it blighted, and the HOA could petition to assume stewardship for the good of the community. That's when Carlos and Jake walked out of my farmhouse. Carlos in his old DEA jacket, badge clipped to his belt. Jake in prosecutor mode, phone out and recording every word. Christine glanced at them, but didn't recognize the danger until it was too late. Ma'am? Carlos said, walking forward with federal authority in his voice. I'm Special Agent Carlos Mendez, DEA. I've been recording this entire conversation. You just made an explicit terroristic threat involving chemical agents on private property in the presence of federal witnesses. You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit agricultural terrorism. Christine's face went from confident to pale in the span of a heartbeat. That's not what It's exactly what you meant, Jake interrupted. I'm Jake Morrison, retired federal prosecutor. What you just described constitutes conspiracy to commit agricultural terrorism under 18 U.S.C. 2332, a attempted extortion under Oregon Revised Statutes 164.075, criminal mischief, and about a dozen other charges we'll discover during discovery. You need to leave this property immediately, before you make this worse. The tanker drivers were looking at each other now, sudden understanding dawning that they'd been hired for something illegal. The younger one stepped down from his cab, hands raised. Nobody told us this was terrorism. We thought this was some kind of community protest. I'm out. Another driver started backing his truck away, engine revving. Christine was screaming at them to stop, that they had contracts, that this was authorized, that the HOA had rights, and that's when the valve failed. One of the tanks hissed. Liquid sprayed across dry grass. Someone shouted. Too late. The spark caught. Whomp. My vineyard exploded into flames. The fire spread faster than thought. Flames racing across dry grass, consuming fence posts, reaching for my vines with orange fingers. Black smoke rolling upward in a column visible for miles. Carlos grabbed my fire extinguisher and ran toward the flames. Jake was on his phone, shouting for emergency services. I sprinted for the barn, to free Cisco, to move equipment, to save what I could before everything burned. The heat hit me like a physical wall. Smoke choking, eyes watering, lungs burning. I could hear my vines crackling, smell 47 years of family history turning to ash. Fire trucks arrived. Sirens. Shouting, hoses, organized chaos. They fought for hours. By the time it was contained, 20 acres of my vineyard were scorched black. My irrigation shed was gone. The south fence was ash. And Christine Harwell was sitting in a sheriff's cruiser, hands cuffed, staring at nothing. The aftermath stretched for months. Criminal investigations, federal charges, civil lawsuits, media attention. My vineyard became a symbol, the small farmer fighting corporate tyranny, David versus Goliath, independence versus conformity. Christine faced 18 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit agricultural terrorism, criminal negligence, attempted extortion, and about a dozen others. The trial lasted 2 months. Carlos and Jake testified. The tanker drivers testified. Video evidence sealed her fate. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Guilty on 15 counts. Sentencing: 8 years federal prison, 3 years state, consecutive, plus $2.5 million in restitution. I filed a civil suit for $6 million. Settled for $6.2 million plus dissolution of the Harmony Hills HOA board and public apology. It took 9 months to rebuild, but the vines grew back, the land healed, and I'm still standing. Christine finishes her work release next month. She plants lavender in the corner where the fire started. Maybe it's atonement, maybe it's just work. I don't forgive her, but I let her plant. Because some things grow back stronger after they burn. The end.